So why is the government surveilling us, and what value does it have to the security of the homeland, or does it have any value at all? Let's go ahead and talk about that with former CIA covert officer Bryan Dean Wright, who joins me from Washington, D.C. His pieces have appeared in the Los Angeles Times, in The Hill, among other places. Bryan, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, so question number one, was there anything in this report that surprised you?
Well, I think that the tactic itself isn't terribly surprising, but the methodology, sort of the modus operandi, as we would call it in the intelligence world, is. In the sense that what's not disconcerting is the fact that law enforcement is using planes or helicopters. They've done that for many years. Heck, if you walk or drive on an interstate or highway, you see that says, patrolled by aircraft. What's different about this collection is the equipment that's attached to these planes and these helicopters. We're talking about the potential for a cell phone acting as though it's a cell phone tower. We're using very high-speed FLIR cameras. It's the collection of that and the type of data. And I think that we want to ensure that law enforcement and intelligence folks have the ability to collect a very discrete, specific set of information related to a likely crime, or one certainly that has been blessed or sanctioned by a judge or a court. What's somewhat disconcerting and that I would want to make sure that we're looking at is in fact that the case that we are going through the judicial process to ensure that the collection of this data is for something that is real and not just a mass vacuum of data. And secondly, as we have all seen, the government is not good at ensuring that it keeps that data close hold. In other words, there have been data breaches that the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, had a massive data leak. So where is this data going after it is analyzed or used? Where is it stored? How secure is that information? That is the piece that I think is fair game for any of us to ask as Americans, because at the end of the day, the government ought to be responsive to us. And so folks on Capitol Hill better be looking at this closely.
What's the main purpose for obtaining this information? Is it to stop acts of terrorism? Is it to stop human trafficking, drug trafficking, stopping crimes as they're occurring? Or is it to build a case in court after you already identified the person as the person that you're going after and you just want to collect evidence to make sure you get a conviction?
Well, great question, and I think the answer is all of the above. Whenever the FBI or Department of Homeland Security has a potential case against, let's say, a Russian suspected spy, right? They're not necessarily going to be excited to talk to everybody about the fact that they're doing that, so they're going to keep that close hold, and they're going to engage those tools to help build that case. On the other side of that, you're certainly going to have other cases where they're going to go before a judge or a court, and they've already built a pretty darn good case, and they want to make sure that they've got even a stronger case to ensure that they have a successful prosecution. So I think that you're going to see, and in fact, do see both uses of this technology.
Now, obviously, they can't tell us, oh, we stopped this act of terrorism, or we stopped this drug cartel from bringing in all of these drugs, or if they don't want us to know about it. Based on what you've read, based on the people that you've talked to, based on your experience within the government, do you believe that this information has stopped acts of terrorism, has stopped the drug cartels before?
I do. I believe so. And I think, having worked with folks in the Department of Homeland Security or DHS and at the FBI, these are good Americans who are trying very, very hard and get very little credibility or receive very little credit, rather, by folks when they are successful, because it's just not publicized. But at the same time, it's important to be asking these questions. We should be ensuring that our oversight committees on Capitol Hill are asking these tough questions. And I think it's important that journalists cover this and expose pieces that perhaps inside the intelligence or law enforcement community or things that are known. But it's important to debate it to ensure that the tactics that you're using, the collection of the data, the storage of that data after the fact, that at the end of the day, the American people have a general sense of it and approve of it. Because again, this is our nation, and we should be governed by laws that we approve of, an activity that we approve of.
What do you think? Do you think that there's not enough of this air surveillance going on, or too much?
I do believe that the government is judicious in its use. Then again, I also think that it's important that we're asking tough questions about, the frequency of flights, how and where are they doing this activity? Why are they doing this activity? There needs to be oversight. I think it is being used thoughtfully, but there's potential for abuse. again, having worked with a lot of the folks who are involved in some of these operations, they're not reckless. At the same time, there are such things as, bad cops. Unfortunately, sometimes that power goes to people's heads. So there can be a very clear degree of abuse to some of this activity. We need to make sure we do good and thoughtful oversight.
Now, there's been some reports that the pilots and the planes have been contracted out to private companies. Whether or not they're fronts for the government, we still don't know yet. We obviously haven't had hearings, so we don't know those details. Would it be reckless to allow a private company outside of the intelligence community within the government to conduct these sorts of flights and obtain this kind of information? Because, as you mentioned in the prior segment, companies can get hacked into. We saw it happen in Hollywood with Sony. And this information is sensitive information, and it may not be legal to put it out there in the public sphere. Do you think that that's a wise decision, or do you think that's a huge mistake?
I got to tell you, this debate has been going on for actually a couple hundred years. The degree to which we use sort of private enterprise in conducting government business, particularly in acts of or battle fronts, acts of war, law enforcement. I understand that people can debate that back and forth. I do think that we should and can use the private sector to help leverage us in areas where we're weak, that is the government. But again, you've got to make sure that you keep that lasso real tight and that data control goes straight to the government. And even then, there should be debate and conversation around how long we're keeping that data and the sort of the decision-making process that goes into why we're collecting that data in the first place. So I don't know that we should never use private industry. In fact, I don't think that that's smart, but we got to keep a very close eye on it.
All right, let's assume that Congress is going to conduct a thorough investigation and turn over every stone in what's going on in the skies. How many surprises do you think we would find based on, I guess, abuse or cases that you wouldn't suspect would be part of this?
Boy, that's a tough call. I think at the end of the day, you will find that the majority of the time that the technology, those planes, the helicopters, the various pieces of equipment like that augmented reality that was in the article that was discussed earlier, that is being used well. Now, are there going to be cases of abuse? I think you're probably going to find that, and that's just, is there malice intended, or was it just sort of bureaucratic oversight? That would be an element of debate and consternation as well. The intent, I think, is critical when you're looking at those cases where it goes beyond what folks intended.
All right, Bryan, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you.